Working. Yeah, we're on, I think. Okay, great. So today's PDR live stream will be going over the pro-Palestine movement in the United States. We're going to start with two videos before we get to the NBC article. Apparently, a group of pro-Palestine protesters disrupted the Thanksgiving Day parade in New York. After the two videos, we're going to discuss what a possible Trump administration would mean to the future of the pro-Palestine movement inside the United States, and specifically looking at anti-terrorism laws that some of the Trump administration potential nominees to the cabinet and allies in the Congress are discussing or are contemplating in using to try to prevent these organized protests from occurring. So we're going to go ahead and play these two videos. Please like the live stream, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do so. To get out of here. God, I hate this. So that's the first video there. Now we're going to take a look at I think this is probably like a right-wing YouTube channel. But this was more of an on-the-ground look from the sidelines of the police arresting some of the protesters. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at this part of the protest, and then we're going to take a look at the NBC article. So according to the previous video, the parade was disrupted for about 5 minutes, but I assume that they then proceeded to complete the parade. And of course, this is in New York. The Thanksgiving parade, which was held 2 days ago, it's always held in New York.
Are you okay? Free Palestine, motherfucker! Free Palestine, motherfucker! This is America! I know where you are, dumbass. You think I don't know where you are? Get the fuck out of here! We're not celebrating generally, faggot. Get the fuck out of here! I just called you. Get the fuck out of here! Say it again, faggot. I'm fucking gay, dumbass. Get out of here! I'm a literal faggot. Good! Get the fuck out of here! Get out of here! Free Palestine, everybody. You see, that's for an arms embargo. So they're already signing shit. Trump's off. It's going to be done. That's for arms embargo. It's going to be done. They're obviously going to get arrested. Yeah. You'd be a great cop. They love you. They love you. You seem really trigger happy. No, it's just bullshit. You have multiple people. He doesn't need to touch me. He can take all the people on board. Don't fucking touch me.
Thousands of innocent children! Free Palestine!
Free Palestine! Not if you double up. The cops are too tight! The cops are too tight! The cops are too tight! Free to the cops! Free to the cops! Free to the cops! Over there, right? Guys, clear back, clear back. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the protest there, and so we're gonna go ahead and stop this broadcast right there. So there it is, and so this was what was reported on NBC News. Before we take a look at the article, kind of wanted to point out a couple of things. It's interesting that the protest was held at a event commemorating Thanksgiving, and a lot of Americans just are not aware of really what's going on around the world, and they're not even aware of their own history. So all that they learn about the history of Thanksgiving is what they learned pretty much in grade school. And so I just popped up the Thanksgiving where that happened, the first, supposedly the myth of the first Thanksgiving happened in the area what today we would call the New England territories, which would be like Massachusetts, would be like one of the most significant states in that area. So the first successful colony was in 1607 in Virginia. John Smith was one of the English colonists. And the reason that the English decided to colonize this part of the world was that there were civil wars happening in England. There was a conflict between people who wanted to reform the Church of England and people who wanted to keep the status quo. And so the English separatists wanted to purify the Church of England from all Catholic influence. So some of them moved during that time period in early 1600s. 1607 was when King James was the monarch. So they first moved to, I believe it was the Netherlands. Then what happened there was that their children started assimilating to some of the cultures, and they didn't really like that. So then they moved here to the Americas. And the Plymouth in 1620 was where this all occurred. And I'm just reading here from Wikipedia that the modern national celebration, it dates back to 1863. So Lincoln made that the official federal holiday in 1863. But it's been linked to the Pilgrims' 1621 Harvest Festival since the late 19th century. The theme of the holiday generally revolves around giving thanks, with the centerpiece of most celebrations being a Thanksgiving dinner with family and friends. And the dinner often consists of foods associated with the New England harvest celebrations. Turkey, potatoes are usually mashed in sweet, squash, corn, green beans, cranberries. So these are all foods that are associated with many of the native cultures of the Americas here. And so it goes on and it says here that the history of the days of Thanksgiving, days attributed to giving thanks to deities, have existed for thousands of years and long predates the European colonizations of North America. So documented Thanksgiving services in what is currently the United States were conducted as early as the 16th century by the Spaniards. And then Thanksgiving services were routine in what became the Commonwealth of Virginia as early as 1607. So I just discussed that earlier. On December 4th, 1619, 38 English settlers celebrated Thanksgiving immediately upon landing at Berkeley 100, Charles City. The group's London company charter specifically required, quote, that the day of our ship's arrival at the place assigned for plantation in the land of Virginia shall be yearly and perpetually kept holy as a day of thanksgiving to Almighty God. This celebration has, since the mid-20th century, been commemorated here annually at present-day Berkeley Plantation, the ancestral home of the Harrison family of Virginia. And the Plymouth colonists, today known as Pilgrims, had settled in part of eastern Massachusetts, formerly occupied by the Patuxent Indians, who had died in a devastating epidemic between 1614 and 1620. After the harsh winter of 1620 to 21 killed half of the Plymouth colonists, two native intermediaries, Samoset and Tisquantum, more commonly known as Squanto, and the last living member of the Patuxent, came in at the request of Massasoit, leader of the Wampanoag, to negotiate a peace treaty and establish trade relations with the colonists, as both men had some knowledge of English from previous interactions with Europeans, through both trade and a period of enslavement. Massasoit had hoped to establish a mutual protection alliance between the Wampanoag, themselves greatly weakened by the same plague that extirpated the Patuxent, and the better armed English in their long-running rivalry with the Narragansett, who had largely been spared from the epidemic. The Wampanoag reasoned that given that the Pilgrims had brought women and children, they had not arrived to wage war against them. Squanto taught the Pilgrims how to catch eel and grow corn, and served as an interpreter for them until he too succumbed to disease a year later. The Wampanoag leader Massasoit also gave food to the colonists when supplies brought from England proved insufficient. And then goes on, and this history, so when you read the history, just looking at it from the internet, in the U.S. we mostly focus on the colonists, right? And then they're these native peoples who just took pity on them. But in reality, it was really, these were two nations, two peoples, and the native, the Wampanoags, were looking out for their own self-interest. And this is what we don't teach in the schools. And we don't teach that a generation later, there were wars between the English settlers or colonists or invaders, if you would rather call them that, and the native groups who lived in that area. There was King Philip's Wars, and King Philip's was one of the leaders of the tribes in that part of the world. Let me see what his real name was. Give me just a second. Metacom, right. So Metacom, that was his real name. But the English, I think, believe they called him King Philip. They gave him that name. And I think one of the Spanish monarchs that was the name of one of the Spanish monarchs at that time, so that could be why they called him that. Well, what they did to this guy is they chopped his head off, placed it on a pike, so that people in that vicinity could see him beheaded, basically, a form of shock and awe. So what's interesting is that, what's going on today in Gaza is just very similar to the history of Thanksgiving. That you have a settler colonial society. The English moved in to the territories today we call the New England territories, and started uprooting the people, the Wampanoags, for instance. They were just one of the tribes there, but they started settling there, and all we do here in the U.S. is just focus on the Thanksgiving, but we don't focus on what happened after. These people illegally came in and just used force to take the land from them, land that did not belong to them. So it's very similar to what's going on with the protesters here are protesting in New York. And just a lot of people here in the United States are just not aware of this history. They don't know much. The history curriculum in the United States doesn't really do a good job of really teaching, because they just focus on Christopher Columbus. They just focus on these markers in history, right? Like Jamestown, Plymouth Rock, right? Then maybe the 7 Years' War or French and Indian War. Then the Stamp Act rebellions, and then the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution. But they never go into depth what happened in between, and what American colonists or settlers were doing to native peoples in between that time and even throughout that time, and how they were pushing them from the coastal Atlantic seaboard. They were pushing native peoples out west, as they too were marching westward. So a lot of that history is not really emphasized. It might be taught in some of the honors classes or the advanced placement classes. You know, it might be taught, but it's not really emphasized, because we want to. It's just like with the right wing; they just want to present the United States, as an exceptional country. Like the history of the United States was exceptional, and actually, that's something that Barack Obama even promoted, and he talked a lot about this shining city on the hill, John Winthrop, and that he too believed that the United States is an exceptional country. Barack Obama, he too used racist rhetoric, because America is not acceptable. If you're saying that America is exceptional, then what you're saying is that white supremacy was okay, because that history was completely white supremacist. Because those people who settled in the New England territories, they were in the beginning had friendly relations with Native peoples, because they were in a weakened position. They couldn't really fight them in the beginning, so they kind of had to depend on them. But they didn't want to really associate with them at all. They didn't want their children to associate with Native children, because they were English separatists. Okay? And the history of separating people from one another on the basis of their race is just replete throughout U.S. history. Same thing is going on in Israel. It's an ethno-state. Okay, so where people who have European ancestry, they're given the full rights. But people who live in the West Bank or in Gaza, they're restricted. Of course, in Gaza, people can't get out. They're not allowed to leave Gaza, and it's what former Prime Minister of Great Britain, David Cameron, called the open-air prison. And even within Israel, Arab people who are not Jewish are not allowed in certain places in Israel, and that's again an apartheid state. So that's again, we have to make the connection of our own history with what's even going on in Gaza right now. So this is the LNBC news article there on the Trump administration and what might happen if see here what's going on. See, oh, it's not even. Sorry, just 1 second here. It's not even showing. So because we have to activate the screen. Okay, let's see what I can do here. Boy. There we go. Okay. So here we go. We got Trump allies and other Republicans have been giving a preview of what could happen to protesters and allied groups once the new administration begins. So the article here starts off with congressional Republicans and former Trump appointees have spent the last year building out their response to the movement protesting Israel's war in Gaza. And now that Donald Trump is returning to the White House, they warn that protest leaders, activists, and those who helped them raise money could face an onslaught of federal investigations and possible indictments. An NBC News review of congressional hearings and letters, along with lawsuits filed by organizations led by former Trump officials, provides a preview of which federal laws a second Trump administration could use when pursuing investigations and potential prosecutions. Judging from what has been pushed thus far, there are several legal measures most likely to be used once Trump returns to Washington. One would be deporting foreign college students in the U.S. on a visa after they're found to have openly advocated for Hamas or another U.S. designated terror group, or after they participated in an unauthorized campus protest and were suspended, expelled, or jailed. Another measure would be to pursue federal prosecutions of demonstrators who block synagogues, entrances, or disrupt Jewish speakers at events. A third approach is to charge protest leaders and nonprofits that aid in fundraising for protest groups with failing to register with the U.S. Justice Department as an, quote, agent of a foreign principal. And a fourth avenue is to open investigations into protest leaders who are in direct contact with U.S. designated terror groups while advocating on their behalf. The multifaceted law enforcement approach is a marked departure from the Biden administration's response to the protest movement. Some of the nation's leading civil rights groups told NBC News that they are gearing up for a flood of legal battles to protect the protesters. And I just wanted to take a quote here from one of the Republicans, senators. President Trump will enforce the law, said Senator John Ernst, a Republican from Iowa, in an email to NBC News. Ernst recently asked the FBI to open an investigation into a pro-Hamas student group at Columbia University called Columbia University Apartheid Divest. A member had threatened Zionists on social media, which the organizations had initially distanced itself from after a strong public outcry, but later supported in an Instagram post. CUAD also has handed out pro-Hamas flyers that circulated around campus featuring masked men and holding weapons. There is a new sheriff in town, Ernst said. The FBI has yet to respond to Ernst's request, her office said. An FBI spokesperson did not immediately respond to requests for comment. A Columbia University spokesperson said CUAD is not a recognized organization by the school and the flyers were under investigation. Members of CUAD declined to comment. So it looks like they're going to highlight on instances like these radical groups who do stuff like this on some campuses. So in this case, this group is not even a recognized student group on campus. But it looks like what they're going to do is they're going to highlight them and try to use them as an example to criminalize all of the pro-Palestine protesters on their campus. So a lot of this is really about what's going to happen inside universities, but it's going to be interesting to see whether they're going to also try to crack down on people protesting outside of universities, like we saw there in the Thanksgiving parade, and how the Trump administration might whether they will try to pressure maybe local law enforcement agencies to crack down on protesters in their local areas there. That's going to be interesting to see what effect or what implications these possible Trump crackdown on pro-Palestine protesters in the U.S. will have, and will there be any type of ramifications in 2026 in the midterm elections like we saw in this recent election in 2024, where many Muslim voters or Arab voters or young people who were pro-Palestine rejected Kamala Harris for the Biden administration's open endorsement of what Israel's doing in Gaza. So what do you think would be a possible implication of this? Do you think that the Trump administration is going to come down hard on these protesters on the campuses and outside of campuses? And what effect do you think that that will have on the pro-Palestine movement? Let me know in the comments. Please like the live stream, and thank you so much for watching. This is a PDR Live, and I'll see you at the next live stream. Thank you so much.